Yeah, so that was kind of the earlier forms of socialism, and then Marxism itself kind of splintered into a few things. Like we said, because of the evolution over time, people kind of took different aspects of it and tried different parts of it, and it evolved into different types of Marxism. You had kind of an orthodox Marxism, which was kind of focused on being a political party that represents the working class and getting involved in government. And so you saw, for example, the German Socialist Social Democratic Party that arose to try to, uh, create conditions for the working class and socialism through that avenue. Um, you had Bolshevism form in Russia. For Lenin, of course, is the biggest name. That kind of took Marxism in that much more centralized party. Uh, um, Revolutionary and insurrectionary sort of direction, right? Um, but then also in Germany, you had the libertarian, going back to Proudhon, the more libertarian Marxists, such as Rosa Luxemburg, that kind of rejected that more Leninist approach, as well as the central political approach for something a little bit closer to what the anarchists were calling for, although not exactly the same. And then anarchism itself, Proudhon had advocated this type of society that was kind of focused around worker cooperatives trading with each other over a type of market, but not exactly capitalism. And um, that sort of idea kind of died out and was replaced with um, anarcho-communism, which Kropotkin is probably the biggest name there. The Conquest of Bread is kind of a fun read. He also wrote the Mutual Aid that we talked about earlier. And there was also syndicalism, which is a very radical form of workers' unions, basically labor unions that are very radically oriented to, yeah, there you go, to organize workers and in the workplace toward eventually the workers owning the business itself, right, taking over. Um, there's stuff to read from all of these different folks if you're interested in these different points of view. But again, these are a lot of different kind of debates over tactics, right? Over how to best move in towards socialism.
And one of the things we'll have out relatively soon is a reading list to accompany this. We've dropped a lot of names and stuff like that, and we'll make sure we'll share this spreadsheet, but we'll also get a nice compiled reading list.
So I guess what I forgot with the libertarian Marxism thing is the to kind of give a little bit of a description of what makes them different is one aspect is like council communism, the original Soviets that made up the Russian Revolution. At first there were Soviets that formed, which were these worker uh, assemblies. That's the term. That essentially tried to oppose the Tsar and change it, and that got all kinds of problems, and that was when Lenin came in and all that stuff. So there's a lot of history that goes there. But the point is that you kind of see these aspects of Marxism and anarchism throughout these different things, that everyone kind of tried different tactics. And so because of that, we can learn from their experiences about what worked and what didn't work, what was more successful, what was less successful. Because unfortunately, none of them so far have, defeated capitalism. Right? We still live in a capitalist world, so we try to learn our best from these experiments. I did throw Adorno and Horkheimer out there for you.
Yeah, well, and the post-Marxists are super important, for this process, right? Mm-hmm. If Marxism started and ended with Marx, we wouldn't be talking about it. Not that he wasn't groundbreaking or anything like that, but 200 years has passed and things evolved, right? During Marx's time, there was a distinct English culture versus German culture, and in Germany, there was even distinct regional cultures, right? You weren't just German; you were from Hamburg, or you were from different areas. There was still this kind of uber locality of the world. Even though we were first starting to see the rise of capitalism and globalization and all that, Marx at the stage of capitalism and at the stage of globalization he lived, didn't have the opportunity necessarily to fully see what was about to happen, right? Gramsci, who lived through World War I and into the 30s, was he was the first one to, or one of the first to really go, holy shit, guys, capitalism's merging with culture, right? Like we're losing a distinct Italian culture, a distinct English culture, a distinct German culture, and we're all becoming capitalists. The capitalist culture is taking. We're not all becoming capitalists. Most of us are being oppressed by capitalism, but all of our societies are becoming capitalist in nature, and they're losing that distinctivity, right? And then Adorno and Horkheimer take that to a whole new level with the culture industry, post World War II, and then you get into people like Guy Debord who start talking about, the society of the spectacle and the myth and the bauble that capitalism has sold, right? And that goes all the way back to what we did at the beginning, right? What Debord talks about in Society of the Spectacle is why we have to start with what is capitalism, because capitalism is a really good salesman of snake oil. That snake oil is usually itself, right? So even ardent advocates of capitalism, and most ardent advocates of capitalism are not capitalists. They do not own their place of production, right? They are wage slaves like the rest of us, but they are ardent advocates of capitalism based on the myth, based on the lie of the American dream, things like that. So, these post-Marxists, if like I said, if it wasn't for them, and then, you get into like Angela Davis starts spinning out on race theory. Julia Kristeva takes Marx and combines him with Freud, right? And you get some really interesting stuff. So it's really, it's really important when you get into, socialism, Marxism, whatever. Don't just read the old white guys, right? They built a foundation that's continuing to be built into a structure that can hopefully at some point realize socialism, right? So we got to make sure that we don't get bogged down running around the foundation and not running up and seeing what's been going on and having it, adapted and applied to our societies. These post-Marxists are, in my opinion, as valuable as reading, Marx and Lenin and people like that. That they are people that are not given enough credit a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure. There's been a lot of developments, and like I mentioned,
added sexuality in, and Leotard added science and started really coming hard at science. About the pedestal that they were on. So there's just, and that's the great thing too, right? That opens up socialism to so many people, right? I can tell my friend with a biochemistry PhD to read Leotard, and it'll have important value to him in his work, right? I don't have to send him to read the manifesto, which he's never going to read. I can find him post-Marxists that are right down his alley that he needs to understand in his field.
Yeah, for sure. The original Marxists and anarchists from the 1800s got carried over. A lot of the names here were from kind of the World War eras, and we can learn from what they did during that era in our post-World War II era now, where global neoliberal capitalism is now the thing. So even though it's different, it's not really that different. We still are facing capitalism, and we still are facing a lot of the same challenges. So
Gramsci's famous writings are from prison, smuggled out of prison, and he was an elected person in Italy. Like he was elected and he was doing the party thing where they were going to win socialism, communism. And another random anecdote that I love bringing up: Pete Buttigieg's dad is why we have Gramsci in English. Mayor Pete, that middle of the road milquetoast white guy's dad, was a leftist academic who translated Gramsci's prison notebooks into English. So the apple fell very far from the
I was going to say it's hard to imagine how it ended up so different, man. So these are some kind of base influences, but of course, there's things in the modern era to look for, which we'll talk a little bit about that in our last few slides here.